For some time, like many of you, I've been concerned with how to slow climate change and mitigate its worst effects. I've also wrestled with how to do so in a way that grapples with the current context of climate denialism at home and competition among global powers overseas. This project is an attempt to define a global governance system for addressing climate change, and to do so, building on the multilateral systems already in place. The nations of the world should build a global enforcement agency, modeled after the International Atomic Energy Agency, which has the power to enforce emissions reductions targets under the Paris Climate Accords. We all know that climate change is real, that it's happening right now, and that what we're doing to fix it isn't working fast enough. If nothing else, the rise in extreme weather events and the devastation they cause to the lives and livelihoods of people and ecosystems should signal the potential devastation of more extreme climate variations. I contend that a truly global problem requires a genuinely global policy solution. And for at least the last 75 years, the nations of the world have worked together at solutions to those challenges. Climate change is the latest and maybe the greatest challenge that humanity has ever confronted. And any meaningful response to it requires a global governance system that can monitor and enforce emissions reductions targets. Fortunately, we already have a policy framework in place to reduce emissions around the globe. In 2015, under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, countries around the world came together and nearly every country made commitments to reduce their emissions, and they agreed on some standards of monitoring themselves. As you know, these are called the Paris Accords. Now, there are a couple of problems with Paris, and it turns out they're pretty big problems. The first, which I won't spend that much time on, is that it's not clear they'll actually keep us to within the 2 degrees Celsius of global warming mandated under the agreement. The second, what I do want to spend time on, is that there's no enforcement mechanism. The Paris commitments are all voluntary, and there's nothing preventing a country from breaching its commitments unless it decides to bind itself. So what I'm proposing, inspired by the existence of the International Atomic Energy Agency, is a global enforcement regime for the Paris Accords. The International Atomic Energy Agency is an independent organization that reports to the United Nations. It has a mandate from participating countries to oversee issues of nuclear safety and security. Among the many things that it does, it monitors compliance with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. My proposal imagines the creation of a similar agency, but to monitor compliance with countries' commitments under Paris. Here's how it would work. At a future United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, countries would negotiate an additional protocol to Paris, an agreement that would mandate the creation of the agency and give it the authority to monitor and ensure compliance with the reductions of emissions under the agreement. This protocol would empower the agency with the authority and ability to levy penalties like fines or sanctions for countries that are found to be in non-compliance with their targets, and in urgent cases, engage in peacekeeping-style operations to protect sensitive carbon sinks around the world, such as rainforests or significant sections of the ocean. And the third problem, of course, is how you get India, China, and the United States on board. There's no doubt that American leadership is absolutely crucial to successful negotiation of a protocol like this. And my sense is that a skilled American president and secretary of state with an interest in getting this done could appeal to China's desire to be seen as a leader on major global issues. India, of course, already has a motivation to come to the negotiation table because it stands to lose a great deal from rising sea levels and incredibly hot temperatures in its cities. Climate change is the geopolitical challenge of the 21st century. So it requires a global governance solution. The current pandemic shows us in real time that our interconnected world needs cooperation to meet transnational challenges. 60 years ago, in the wake of the Cuban Missile Crisis, in the face of nuclear annihilation, countries of the world recognized the threat of nuclear weapons and came together to limit their proliferation and their testing under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It wasn't a perfect solution. It hasn't prevented proliferation or testing, but it has established a global norm against the possession and use of nuclear weapons. No human solution is perfect, but the scale and the scope of the climate crisis should call the nations of the world to act in a similar fashion. We need an International Atomic Energy Agency for climate, a global enforcement regime that can track progress to the Paris goals and hold countries accountable for meeting their commitments. Thank you.